Hello, friends. Welcome back, and thank you for joining me for episode 5. Have you ever wondered not just if prayer changes your circumstances, but how it's changing you? In letter 4 of the Screwtape Letters, C.S. Lewis explores how the way we pray, our posture, intent, and assumptions, can shape our hearts and even the effectiveness of our prayers. Let's dig in. In this letter, Screwtape's target is the patient's prayer life. He touched on this in his last letter about the patient's relationship with his mother, but wanted to expand on the many tactics available for derailing it. He doesn't want to stop prayer, he wants to twist it. He tells Wormwood to keep the patient focused on feelings rather than on God. The goal? Prayer that's empty of power and more about mood than transformation. Screwtape wants the patient's prayers to become vague, unfocused, almost imaginary. He doesn't necessarily want to stop him from praying, he just wants him praying to the wrong thing. So instead of directing his attention to the real living God, the patient begins to pray to kind of a mental picture, a version of God he's built in his own mind. And Lewis points out something really important here. It's possible to be on your knees saying all the right words and still not actually be addressing God at all. It's like you're trying to send a letter with no address. You wrote it, you meant it, you even put effort into it, but it's not going anywhere. Or like trying to have a conversation with someone while only looking at a picture of them. There's something that feels real about it, but there's no actual interaction happening. And this is where prayer can quietly drift into something closer to daydreaming than conversation. Our mind wanders, our focus shifts, and we start thinking about how we feel or how spiritual the moment feels, instead of actually engaging with God himself. And the danger is, it can feel like we prayed, when in reality, we never truly turned our attention to the Father. Screwtape wants prayers centered on the patient's feelings. But here's the trap. If we measure prayer by feelings, we'll think it failed when we don't feel something. Worse, we might blame God. Lewis warns true prayer isn't about conjuring emotion. It's about turning toward God honestly, feelings or not. Screwtape gives another really sharp piece of advice here. When the patient prays for something charitable, for others, for good things, he should quietly shift the focus back onto himself. Instead of truly interceding, he begins imagining himself in need of that same help. Now, on the surface, that might sound humble, but Lewis is exposing something deeper here. Even our charitable prayers can become self-centered if we're not careful. We start with someone else in mind, but somehow we end up back at ourselves. And if we're honest, this shows up in a really common way. For a lot of people, prayer really only kicks in when life feels off, when something's wrong or something's unfair or something isn't going the way that we think it should. And the prayer becomes less about God and more about our situation. Like, why is this happening to me? Why haven't you fixed this yet? Or don't you see what I'm dealing with? Now, those are real questions, but if that's all prayer becomes, then we've subtly turned God into someone who exists primarily to resolve our discomfort. And Lewis is warning us that's not prayer. That's self-concern dressed up in spiritual language. Real prayer doesn't ignore hardship, but it does reframe it. Instead of just asking, why is this happening to me? It begins to ask, Lord, what are you doing in me through this? How can I respond in a way that honors you? How can I love others, even here? That shift changes everything. Because now prayer isn't about pulling God into our agenda, it's about aligning ourselves with his. Lewis reminds us that true prayer is not about chasing a feeling. It's about bringing your real self to a real God, not an idea of God, not a version of God that we've imagined, but the living God, whether we feel anything in the moment or not. And this is where Lewis makes a really practical observation. He points out that we are not just spiritual beings, we're physical beings too. We are, in his words, animals, which means what we do with our bodies often shapes what happens in our minds. So while not every prayer needs to be said on bended knee, there's a reason that posture has mattered throughout history. Because sometimes your body can help lead your mind into the right place. Kneeling slows you down. It humbles you. It reminds you who you're speaking to. Stepping away from distractions, getting alone, even going for a walk with the intention to pray, these things help pull prayer out of the realm of casual thought and into something intentional. Because let's be honest, a lot of our prayers happen half distracted. We're driving or scrolling or thinking about the next thing. And again, there's nothing wrong with praying throughout your day. But if that's all prayer is for you, it can easily drift into that same place Lewis warned us about, something casual, something unfocused, something that never really engages God at all. Sometimes we need to devote time to prayer, to step away, to be still, to kneel or sit or walk intentionally, and actually give God our attention. Not because posture earns anything, but because it helps us align our hearts with what we're doing. Because real prayer isn't just something we think, It's something we enter into. In this letter, Lewis shows us that prayer is a battleground. Let's make sure our prayers aren't vague or self-centered, but real, directed toward God with our full being. Next week, we'll explore letter 5, where Screwtape addresses fear and war. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next Friday.